Okay, so maybe you were absent yesterday, or maybe you're struggling a little bit with this whole moon phase thing, which is just fine. This isn't easy, but things will get a lot easier once we kind of get these terms down a little bit. So if I were you, I would make sure I add this to your ISN if you really don't have it in your ISN yet. So there's a couple of key phrases, terms, whatever you want to say. One of the big phrases you're going to hear over and over is this one: light from the right. What that means is, as the moon starts out as a new moon, which is completely black. So I'm going to go ahead and shade the new moon in all the way, right? So as you go from a new moon, as it gets to be light from the right, what's going to happen is as the moon is growing, you're going to start getting a sliver of light from the right. That means it's growing and getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And as we go through this, that's exactly what you'll see, is that the light comes from the right, right? And it keeps coming from the right until it turns into what we call full moon, right? Where it's all lit up. And then actually what happens is it starts to get darker from the right as well as the moon goes all the way through its cycle. And then it gets all dark again. So this will be your other new moon. So this is one lunar cycle, going from a new moon to a full moon, back to a new moon, right? And as you see, the light comes from the right, and then the shadow starts to come in from the right. So that's what we mean, light from the right. You can tell it's growing or getting more light if the light is coming from the right, and then you can tell it's getting darker as the shadow comes from the right, right? Now, how do we know it's growing or fading? Well, that's light from the right, but what do we call that? Well, if it's growing, we call that waxing, right? So this is waxing because it's heading toward being a full moon, and this is waxing, and this is waxing even more, and now you're a full moon. So we call that waxing. It's like growing. Think of it in someone's lifetime, right? When you are a young person, you are waxing, you're growing and growing and growing until maybe you hit your mid-30s or whatever. You can call that being your full moon, right? And then, you start to become like Mr. Smith, and you're waning and you're waning and you're waning toward the end of your life, right? So waxing is growing, waning is fading. And we know which one is which because light from the right, all right? And then there's the shape we see. If you see a little sliver, right, that's going to be a crescent, right? In this case, though, it's a waxing crescent. Well, how do I know it's waxing crescent? Because light's from the right, it's growing, it's heading toward being a full moon. So I would call this a waxing crescent. Cool, right? It's crescent, right? If it's almost all the way full, but not quite full, we call that a gibbous. It's almost full, but it's not quite there. In this case, this is a waxing gibbous because it's growing. Light's coming from the right, so we'll call this a waxing gibbous. Light's coming from the right. It's growing still. And then we have our full moon. But oh no, now we're starting to fade, right? Fade is called waning. So now we have a waning, and let's see. Which one of the, it's almost full, it's not quite full. So this would be our waning gibbous. And then down here, oh man, it's all we have is a little sliver left, and the light's coming, the light is supposed to be from the right, we have shadow coming from the right. So this is waning, right? It's fading, it's getting less and less bright because it's heading toward our new moon, right? And it is, it's a crescent, right? It's a little sliver. So this is our waning crescent. So hopefully you're seeing the order here. New moon, ignore that bell. Waxing crescent, right? Then something we're gonna get to. Waxing gibbous full, then it starts to wane. We'll get to that in a second. Wanes even more and comes back to the new moon. This cycle repeats over and over and over again, right? What comes after the new moon here? Well, that would be the waxing crescent, and then so on and so forth. Now, where it gets a little confusing is what we call these moons. These moons are called the first quarter and the third quarter. Now, why would you call it that, Mr. Smith? Well, if you think of this as one long process from beginning to half to end, right? What's between the beginning and the half of something is a quarter, right? And in this case, right, it's first quarter, and really you can tell that because it's waxing, it's getting bigger, it's getting more light. So we call that our first quarter. And I can see where you want to call that a waxing half moon. Like, I get it, I would want to call it that too, but really we'll call it a first quarter because the light is on the right, we can tell it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But once it starts waning, the shadow's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And look, we're 3/4 of the way there, right? So it's called the third quarter. And look at the difference between the two, right? Our first quarter is waxing because it has light from the right. And the third quarter is waning because it's got shadow on the right. I hope that makes some sense to you. So these are our moon phases, right? And here's the terminology we need to have. I know this is a bit of a long video, my apologies, but hopefully we're seeing this progression, which matches the last video that you watched if you're struggling. I hope this helps you. If not, you can always come see me. Thanks.